Right, hello and welcome to a rather exciting week on this Cummins swap Land Rover. Now this week's exciting because what we're going to be doing is attaching this bit here to that bit there. So last week you would have seen us finishing up some bits on the engine and getting the gearbox attached, getting the adapt plate on and getting the transfer box on. Now you will notice I've undone all that work because we're waiting for the output shaft seal for the gearbox before we can bolt all that up once and for all. We've also given the adapt plate and all those gubbins a little coat of paint. While we're waiting for those bits to arrive, however, there's plenty to get on with. So this week is going to be all about mounting. So we've got the truck up here, and what we're going to do is lift it up. We'll have a look at the brackets we've got, because we've got a bit of a kit here for the engine mounts, the transfer box, and I think some gearbox mounts as well. But let's get the truck up, take a look at the chassis and see what modifications we need to do to start with before we can slip this big lump in. So before we go and have a look under the truck, let's have a look at the kit here. So this we saw last week. This is the bit and this bit and those bits there. That's all the bits that go on or the back of the gearbox to allow the transfer box to bolt to the gearbox. This bolts onto the gearbox and the adapt plate. These weld on to the chassis, something like that, onto the two rails, and that allows this bit here, which bolts onto the transfer box on the original mounts, I believe, and this bit that bolts onto the adapt plate to be attached. Now, those obviously have to get welded on to the chassis, but I think they get welded on to these parts here, which we'll go and have a look at where those fit on the chassis in a minute. These are the engine mounts, so I'm not 100% sure which is left or right. The engine sits slightly further left, so I'm assuming that is the right one because it's longer. Rather helpfully as well, someone's labelled the engine type on there just in case you're changing your oil or something and you forget. So walking underneath the truck now, if we have a look up in here, what we have, so that's an exhaust mount there, and then this is one of the original transfer box mounts. That one there, that's the other original one. Sorry, I'm trying to hold a bit of plate at the same time. And these plates bolt on to the chassis using, I believe, this hole that's got that earth stud in it, and that hole. So what we need to do is get in here, cut off these original mounts. It's the same on this side, so the hole there, and there's another one there, but obviously this mount is in the way, and those mounts are for, say, standard engine position, standard gearbox, standard transfer box, basically peasants. Safe is not sexy. Giving up with that. Favourite tool in the world. Right, that was just awful. Just looking at fitting this bracket here, so this is the one that will, with a rubber mount, will attach back to the chassis. And I've discovered another wonderful feature of this kit. Not those bolts in there, look. Yeah, they fit lovely. Those ones, however, not quite so great. So we've got an opportunity here to maybe drill those ones out. All right, that's the beginnings of the bracket on the other side. Now these are the mounts I believe we're meant to be using, so these are actually spare ones from our Daimler project, but these are Land Rover engine mounts. They might be, I can't remember what they are, 300 TDI or V8 mounts or something of that sort of variety. Well then, the big moment is nearly upon us. So I've got the engine lifted up here, half on the chain hoist and half on the engine crane. That should stop either one of them snapping, hopefully. And what I'm going to do is lower the truck down and roll the truck up to the engine and try and feed it in that way. So we'll try and keep the engine still and move the truck to the engine. Right, so the engine's nearly in. You can see we're getting rather close. That crank pulley's got to be sort of just behind that front cross member, and the centre line, I believe, just sort of nearly in line with it, with the top of it. But this is our first bit we're hitting. So this little corner of the bulkhead down here has got to be cut out to allow that whole starter area to clear. So we're getting closer. The problem we're having now, if we look down here, is the engine is currently sat on the anti-roll bar. So what we're going to do for the moment is we'll lift the engine back up, and then we will unbolt that anti-roll bar, leave it off for the moment, and then later on when we've got it on the ramp, we can space these blocks down a bit, get it all out of the way once the engine's in the correct position. All right, that's all dangling down there out of the way. Let's carry on slipping this big lump in. So we're just getting the engine set up in the right place now. This is the instructions I've got. So the engine wants to be 1 inch back from the front cross member, 40 to 50 mil to the right. I'm guessing that is from the centre line, and the centre line of the crank level with the top of the front cross member. So what we've got here is a found centre of the chassis, which is this line here. This line is then 30 mil over, and then we've got another scribe mark for 35 and 40. But at the moment we are just a little bit over 30 mil to the right, which is good. And we are a little bit too far forward, but this seems to be where the mounts seem happy. So I'm not quite sure I can push it back any further than that at the moment. And height wise, we're pretty much bob on, maybe a little bit low. So we'll come up a bit. Bearing in mind, this is all likely to drop eventually when we put the rubber mounts on, they will sink. So every measurement we do here is a bit of a guess. We've then got that mount to tack on there, which fits kind of okay. It's very close to those bolts. Same on this side. So that will work, but again, really tight up to that filter there. Not a lot of room either side, and really tight around the bolts. So if I was to move that engine back so it's an inch further back, that's going to be worse. It's going to be more like sort of that, which really isn't going to line up very well. We'll get it lined up as best we can, get the engine mounts tacked in. Then we can let it down on there, and then we can concentrate on the gearbox mounts and the transfer box mounts. Right, this engine mount's really affecting me. I cannot deal with welding on at a crappy angle like that. And if we do, it's going to make servicing it really tricky and getting to any of this. It's just going to be a pain. So what I'm going to do is take it off. I'm going to take that off, and then we'll trim it down. We'll cut these gussets off for the moment, and we'll get the top plate tacked on, and then in the future we will re-weld the gussets on in a different place so that it's not stopping you from undoing those bolts, and it means you can actually service your truck with a filter spanner. Loads of room. So they're both tacked on. This side I've also gone ahead and cut one of the other folds off the gussets and welded that on. The other side I'm going to do when the bracket's off the truck and we fully weld it. That should be enough to hold it for now. It is rather unfortunate though, because that gusset has sort of cut the Cummins name in half. Right, what we're going to do now then is attempt to let the hoists off, and at least one of them. If we can get both of them off, that'd be great. And then, if that works, have a quick cup of tea, get some batteries for the angle finder, and we'll attack the other bit. And nothing's broken. Good news. So underneath the truck now, as you can see, so this is the transfer box up here. That's our adapt plate. That's our output to the rear prop shaft, which is back here. Now, what we're trying to do is get the flanges, so this flange here and that flange, as parallel as possible. So at the moment on here, we've got 87.18 degrees on that flange. And up here, we have 89.5, so we're a couple degrees off. But again, when we take the jack off and we have it on these rubber mounts, that's all going to drop down. So what we'll have to do is tack these in place now and then see how much it sinks and measure everything again and check how close we are. The front prop is an absolute mess at the moment, so that flange at the front is pointing up by a long way, and this is also pointing upwards. I think Land Rovers are pretty horrendous for sort of prop shaft alignment anyway, but we'll try and make it as good as possible. So we're just about ready to start welding the brackets on. I've just tacked on these plates to either side of the chassis. That's what our brackets will weld to. I've also pushed the engine back a little bit further, so we sort of ran out of room on the engine mounts, but for the moment I've just undone these bolts, slid it back a little bit further just to give us that sort of inch clearance at the front. We'll get the rear mounts on and then we'll sort out something. Maybe we'll rejig these ones. For now, what I'm going to do is weld the brackets on, allow it to sink, and then see how close we are. Okay, well that's both those mounts tacked in place. Let's let the jack down and hope it doesn't all fall out. Unjacking happening now. That's unjacked. It's in. It's in. So back in the next day, we got the transfer box and gearbox mounts in last night. When I come in the morning, I've had another measure up and I'm not quite happy with where the engine mounts are. So we're still a little bit too far to the left. So we're about 35 mil over to the right, but it wants to be 40 to 50 mil to the right. Now, I couldn't get it over any further, and I've just had a look at these mounts, and basically I can't get to the end of that slot because it hits this gusset here. So we're going to take that bracket off and we'll modify that gusset so we can at least use the full range of adjustment. This plate also, we've run out of adjustment left and right on this plate as well, so we're right at the end of the slot here. The engine's about correct left and right now, where it should be according to the instructions, but say that slot's run out there. So I was just doing some marking out, ready to cut this, and this is the amount of material we'd have to take off to let this clear. So although there it doesn't look too bad, it's just about touching. When the engine's on it and this compresses, so this all pushes down, it's obviously then up here somewhere. So instead of cutting that much off and then losing all the strength in this gusset and having to remake all of this, what I'm actually going to do is cut these gussets off like I did on the other side, on the other bracket, and then we'll re-weld them on later on further back, and that will solve our issue without causing too much other work. Right, well, that's both the engine mounts complete. I've elongated that hole. You wouldn't even know I'd been there, to be honest. Nothing a big washer can't fix. So we'll get all this on. We'll drop the engine back down, sit it in the right position on its mount, and then we can push it back onto the ramp and weld up the underside, the transmission mounts back there. But first, lunch. Right, well, that's sat back down and all looking tip top. So the engine is now on the 40 mil mark to the centre line of the crank. So that's sat a lot further over. We're right up against the end of this slot again, so we're already out of adjustment, but that is in just about the right place. And the centre line of the crank is about bob on with the top of the cross member. So that is just where we want to be. Right, as you can see, the vehicle is now up in the air on the ramp. I've given it 10 minutes just to sit there and I've admired it from the corner of the workshop with a cup of coffee, because this is a rather heavy thing now with the spec lift on the back and 750 kilos of engine and gearbox in the front. And I don't have the utmost confidence in the Chinese ramp. So I just thought, if it's going to fall off, I'd rather be watching it from the outside than the underneath. Let's go and take a look underneath. Now it's all relatively safe. And have a look at what we got to do. Okay, so that's all now welded on and nice and strong. I've just gone and cut the bottoms off that bracket as well. Now, it's nice to know that the gearbox isn't going to fall out. What we'll have to do is we will have to drill those out and put some bolts through there when we take all the engine and everything back out, but we will be doing that later on once all the main fabrication work's done. Right, well, that's going to finish us off for today's episode, guys. This is a massive step forward in this build, but it doesn't mean to say we're nearly done, because all this has really done is unlock a load more work. The next sort of steps are we've got to finish up the fabrication, which means remounting that anti-roll bar we've had to move lower down, making up the gearbox tunnel, making up a selector system for the high-low and diff lock, as we've now moved the transfer box back. Then it'll be on to stuff like intercooler piping, radiator piping, making the new exhaust, plumbing up all the last little bits, and then the electrical stuff. So we've got a lot of work ahead of us, but as some of you know, I am now completely unemployed. That was my own doing and my own choosing, which is good news. So that means I'm going to be in this workshop full time, and our main concentration for the month ahead is going to be this truck. We need to get this back to Greg, so firstly he can go and enjoy using it and hopefully make some money with it, and then we can move on to a couple rather exciting projects we've got going into December. I'm looking forward to showing you those, but for now I'm going to love you and leave you, and thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and as I'm now fully unemployed and in the workshop, if you've got any crazy engine swap ideas or maybe normal engine swap ideas, bits of tuning, fabrication work, stuff like that, get in touch. But for now, I'll see you again next week.